Thank you for waiting, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I'd like to start the Faroe Islands, bridging oceans through friendly relations, trade, and tourism, with the presence of the Deputy Prime Minister Høgni Hoidal of the Faroe Islands. Let me introduce myself. I am Yamada of Sasakawa Peace Foundation, OPRI. Now, at the outset, I should like to invite Dr. Hide Sakaguchi, President of our institute, to welcome you. Good afternoon.
Welcome to Sasakawa Peace Foundation. Thank you very much.
As was introduced, I am Sakaguchi of the OPRI of Sasakawa Peace Foundation. At the outset, I'd like to say a few words to start this seminar or the lecture. First of all, to His Excellency, the Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Høgni Hoidal of the Faroe Islands, His Excellency, the Mr. Peter Taxo Jensen, the Ambassador of Denmark to Japan, and Mr. Sigmundo Isfeld, the head of the representation Faroe Islands in Beijing, the Mr. Rene Aune of the Deputy Acting Ambassador of Norway to Japan, and the Mr. Tadahiko Ito, the member of the Parliament, who is also the member of the Arctic the committee, and then Mr. Hironobu Ryono, Deputy Mayor of Taiji-chan of Wakayama Prefecture, and the President of Sushizanmai of Mr. Kimura. Thank you very much for your presence. First of all, I'd like to express my hearty appreciation to you all for your presence on this occasion at the lecture with the presence of His Excellency Deputy Prime Minister Mr. Høgni Hoidal of the Faroe Islands. As you may know, it is the autonomous territory of the Royal Denmark, which is known for the abundant natural resources with the beautiful landscape, including the productive fishery industry, including salmon. In recent years, they have achieved rapid economic growth with per capita GDP exceeding $60,000. And thus, it is such an affluent region. And talking about the Denmark itself for many years, according to the World the Happiness Report, it is always ranked among top countries in the world, as you may know. Now, talking about the Faroe Islands and the relationship with Japan, the relationship between the two is increasingly close. I don't think there are many Japanese people that are versed in the situation in the Faroe Islands. But in 2022, when the Foreign Affairs Minister Yanis Aframe came to Japan, back then the Memorandum of Understanding on Cooperation between the government of Japan and the government of the Faroe Islands was concluded, and ever since, various initiatives, including whaling-related affairs, have started. And even ahead of the government-level cooperation and exchange, as we have members of Taiji-chan of Wakayama Prefecture, they have entered into the sister city agreement with the Krakspeak, the second, the largest town in the Faroe Islands, with an aim to present the legitimacy of the whaling activity. And thus far, we are seeing the increasing level of collaboration between two sides at different levels. Our foundation also hosted the Arctic Circle Forum Japan in March 2023. And back then, we had the Mr. Sigmundo Isfeldo, who is head of the representation of the Faroe Islands in Beijing, who is going to join us in the panel discussion today, as well was present in this forum. And thus, as we heard that the Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Hoidal, is coming to Japan, we decided to ask the Mr. Isfeldo to join us, and thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Now, just briefly about the background of the Mr. Hoidal. He was born in Copenhagen, the capital of Denmark, in 1966. Then he went to the Roskilde University to major in the history and communication and received a master's degree. And ever since, he served in different roles, including public school teacher, the deckhand on Coast Guard vessels, the worker in fish factories, as well as the journalist at the national television. And then he was elected as the member of the parliament of the Faroe Islands in 1998, and then became the leader of the Republican Party of the Faroe Islands in 2000. And he has served in different roles in the government, including the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Judicial Affairs and Nordic Cooperation, Minister of Culture and Education, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Nordic Cooperation, the Minister of Fisheries and Agriculture. Not only that, he also served as the representative of the Faroe Islands at the Danish Parliament, as well as the Nordic Council. And today we have an honor of having a Deputy Prime Minister Hoidal with such a preeminent background to tell us about the diplomatic relationship at the Faroe Islands, as well as the trade and tourism policies, as well as the role of the Faroe Island in the Arctic policies. Hope that today's lecture is going to be the opportunity for you to think about how we can further bring two sides even closer. In conclusion, I'd like to express for the happiness and the health, as well as my heartfelt appreciation for your contribution to make this event reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sakaguchi. Now, we'd like to invite the next speaker, His Excellency Mr. Peter Taksson Jensen, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Kingdom of Denmark, for a brief remark, please. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for coming here today, and I wanted to start with a special thank you to our friend Sakaguchi-san, who's been working closely with the embassy to strengthen our relations, also with those parts of Denmark which are here today, the Faroe Islands. So thank you so much for your kind words and your continued collaboration and support. I also want to thank the Sasakawa Peace Foundation and especially the Ocean Policy Research Institute for hosting this excellent seminar that we're going to embark on, or already embarked on, where we have His Excellency Høgni Hoidal, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs, Industry and Trade of the Faroe Islands present. It's a true pleasure for the Royal Danish Embassy to represent the entire realm of Denmark, including the Faroe Islands and Greenland here in Japan. At the same time, the friendship between Japan and the Faroe Islands continues to be strengthened through increasing exchanges between our people and also with enhanced economic relations. As Minister Hoidal will likely emphasize in his presentation, Japan and the Faroe Islands share much in common: a beautiful nature, a productive fishery industry, and kind people. That is why I believe that the Faroe Islands and Japan can bridge oceans through friendly relations, trade and tourism, as this title of this seminar aptly suggests. I hope you'll find Minister Hoidal's presentation both interesting and enlightening. Thank you so much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Now we'd like to invite the keynote address by His Excellency Mr. Høgni Hoidal, Deputy Prime Minister. And please refer to the material in the handout for the brief background of His Excellency Mr. Hoidal.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends, thank you so much for the invitation to speak here today. And thank you for the kind word of introduction, Dr. Sakaguchi. And we are here in Japan this week also to promote relations between Japan and the Faroe Islands. And this invitation, the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, we find so obvious to address, because what you work with here is what the world most needs today. Work on peace, and of course focusing on the ocean that unites us and that address so many of the challenges of the world today. I will try to make a brief introduction to the Faroe Islands and the main issues that we are addressing in the Faroe Islands towards cooperation with other countries, not least Japan. And you are welcome, of course, to ask me afterwards of more detailed information. And basically, to start, as His Excellency the Ambassador mentioned, even though Japan and the Faroe Islands are very different, Japan with its own civilization for millenniums, the Faroe Islands as a small nation in population with a Viking tradition, and we believe that we have settled the islands for approximately 1,500 years. But we have our own culture, our own language, and our own nation, and are almost practically autonomous in every aspect of politics of the world today. But if you look at the map of the Faroe Islands, yes, can I back here? Yeah. If you start with the map, I don't know if you see it. The Faroe Islands are not very large in landmass. We are approximately 1,400 square kilometers of landmass, 18 islands, 18 different islands, also with different dialects and so on. But if we add the ocean, if we add our own 200 nautical miles sea limit with our own exclusive economical zone, we are actually a very large ocean nation of the world today, as of course Japan is also. And you could practically say that all our history and all our approach to the world is based upon the ocean that unites us, the ocean that produces the most important issues of our livelihood, of our exports. So in the Faroe Islands, you can say we have a small landmass, but the rest is ocean. And that is our approach to so many issues of the world today. And actually, we often see ourselves as a periphery. But actually, if you look at the map here at the North Atlantic, we see the Faroe Islands as the middle of everything, or as the center of everything, of climate change, of managing living resources of the sea sustainably. In security matters, we are a quite strategic point. So basically, my claim today here is that the Faroe Islands, even though we are not so voluminous in the population, but in our place in the world, we are at the moment in the middle of everything, also of the tense situation of the world today. So, if we look at this map, picturing also the possible new sail routes the Faroe Islands are there and Japan is here. I hope we have taken all the Japanese territory with us in that circle. Also here we are in the middle of everything. With climate change and the possible new sea routes, especially the northeast route, all access to the North Atlantic, to the US and so on, this way will have to go through the Faroe Islands. And to speak about ocean policy, climate change and the whole sustainability of the North Atlantic Ocean and the Arctic Ocean, also there the Faroe Islands are in the middle of everything, because Faroe Islands are the place where the cold waters from the Arctic and the warm waters from the South Atlantic meet and create the very rich environment for fish and living resources, but also the Faroe Islands are the crucial pump where hot and cold water meets, and if that pump stops because of climate change, it will have huge consequences for the whole of the Arctic and for all our neighborhood and for all our neighboring countries, and perhaps for the whole world. So that's our place in the world. And we, of course, look forward, even though climate change is our biggest challenge, that also in the future we will be more easily connected to our good friends in Japan. Basically, as I said, we are 54,000 people with our own language and have to also sustain our own language as a modern language in all literature, in arts, in music, in television, on every level, so that's also a challenge. The capital is Tórshavn. Our language is Faroese, derived from the Old Norse languages, and we are a self-governing nation in close cooperation with Denmark. And as I will address, we are addressing also the more emerging issues of foreign policy and global challenges today, also trying to take our own responsibility in the world on every matter. This is our government buildings. So we have our own government and our own parliament called the Løgting. And basically, the Faroe Islands, even though they are not so well known in Japan, has been for many years built up on the same principles as the other Nordic welfare countries, with very strong collective rights for education, health care, and so on, basically paid by the taxpayers. And the main income is still connected to the ocean. This is the land area and the maritime area, and we are also part of the Arctic, both as an entry to the Arctic, but also we are geographically part of the Arctic and are of course engaging in all Arctic issues, also in many ways in cooperation with Japan's approach to Arctic issues. Just to address the security situation, as you, of course, and we try to see from a Japanese worldview also, we know how your challenges, but also because of the Russian aggression in the Ukraine. The whole security situation in the North Atlantic is also becoming more tense. And actually, the Faroe Islands are also here in the middle. So the so-called GI-UK gap between Greenland, Iceland, and the Faroe Islands, that is where the Russian Northern Fleet would approach the rest of the world, just to the south and the north of the Faroe Islands. And also when it comes to surveillance of airspace, the Faroe Islands are perhaps the most strategical place in the North Atlantic, also regarding especially NATO's approach to keeping security and stability in the North Atlantic. Per capita, again, fish is everything in the Faroe Islands, so per capita we have perhaps the largest fishery of every country of the world. Approximately we fish 40 kilograms per day per capita. And that is both wild living fish, but also aquaculture, especially salmon. And we claim, of course, that we have the best salmon in the world, and those who haven't tried it should do so. I think you would agree with me, that's the best salmon in the world. Our foreign policy is, of course, not fully independent. but in close cooperation with Denmark, we have gained further access to the world, and especially, again, the ocean unites us with the world. And our whole approach to global issues and our whole approach to the global challenges is that we need to have international law, international treaties regulating all our cooperation, not only the North Atlantic, but all over the world, and also to have bilateral agreements and multilateral agreements with all our neighbors on every issue, especially related to management of the sea, security, and security issues of transportation, and so on and so on and so on. So that is our approach. And because Denmark joined the European Union in 1973, the Faroe Islands chose to stay outside, especially to have the sovereignty over our ocean. Denmark has, of course, accepted that we have to have our own trade agreements with other countries, our own bilateral fishing agreements, and also engage in all international fora of significance for both the Faroe Islands, but for the world as well, especially on climate change, on regional management of fish resources, and so on and so on. So we are active in all these different international forums, and we have also diplomatic representations in Brussels, Copenhagen, London, Reykjavik, Moscow, Beijing, Tel Aviv, and Washington. So that is the approach of the Faroe Islands to being a part and a responsible, reliable part in the world. And our main aim is to maintain peace, security, human rights, and democracy, not only in our part of the world, but also to engage on every level that we can do our part in reaching that goal for the whole world. One point where we also have been and we appreciate very much that Japan also has been taking active part, not only in the Arctic, as an observer to the Arctic Council, but also in the so-called organization NAMCO, that is North Atlantic Mammal Organization, dealing with small whales. Also there we have a close cooperation with Japan, which we appreciate very much. So we have, in many ways, the same approach to ocean policy and to ocean issues as Japan has. The right to utilize living marine resources if it's done sustainably and with the best scientific data and best scientific cooperation. And to address Japan just once more, we have signed, as was mentioned here, we have signed a memorandum of cooperation with Japan, where we try to engage on many issues, on research, education, culture, tourism, trade, climate change, and so on and so on. And we are trying to make concrete steps to increase our bilateral relations with Japan. Japan, as we see, as our like-minded friends in the world. The economy, I will not go into detail, but basically, again, the rest is ocean. So 90% of our exports are related directly to living resources of the sea, basically wild living fish stocks that are also, of course, common fish stocks for the countries in the North Atlantic. And then there is aquaculture, especially salmon. Those are approximately 90% of our exports, and the rest is tourism and other services and so on. So we are a very, very modern, highly developed society in many ways, but most things are, of course, developed in connection with the ocean. We are a very open economy. We are trying to really believe in free trade as a way to a peaceful world and to peaceful cooperation between nations. So basically, we have very few restrictions for other countries to selling their goods and services to the Faroe Islands, but we have some restrictions towards other countries, especially on fishery products. And we have some free trade agreements with the EU, with Iceland, Norway, Switzerland, Turkey, and the UK. So that is basically the main part of the export economy. But otherwise, we are quite similar to Japan with a highly skilled population, working in services, both public and private services on so many issues. these are the export numbers, where our biggest export market is the EU, and then the US, the UK. Russia has been a huge partner, but is of course now reduced heavily. Norway, China, and others. And our trade relations with Japan could be emerge very much further in the future if we want to do so. And we do want that from the Faroe side. And you can see the species here. Farm fish is a big part of the value of exports, while the wild living fish stocks are still a huge part, but are decreasing compared to the farmed fish. Also because of climate change and because of disagreements between our neighbors on how to manage the migrating common fish stocks. So every year we try to do coastal states agreement with the UK, with the European Union, with Norway, with Iceland, with Greenland, and also partly with Russia until the crisis, in order to maintain a rule-based international approach to managing common living resources of the sea. Tourism is, of course, an emerging part of our economy. We say it's approximately 6% of our export value at the moment. And we sell ourselves as unexplored, unchanged, and unharmed. But that is, of course, a challenge, because, as I mentioned, our landmass is 1,400 square kilometers. And every inch of the Faroes' nature is used for something, mainly for sheep, for farming, and so on. So when tourism comes, and the tourists, of course, should experience the Faroes' nature, there are clashes, because the tourism can be a pressure on nature. So we have just adapted a new law called the Law on Sustainable Tourism. It was passed 1.5 months ago. And basically it states that every local community should have their own tourism infrastructure and plan, where they can say how many tourists can come into the area. And the main focus is preserving nature and preserving the local culture and creating local income. And then we take a fee for every, a kind of a hotel tax that is going directly to the local communities in order to invest in nature protection and development of the local culture, and also to create local income in these different local societies. So in the Faroe Islands we have approximately 130 towns and villages, and every village and town has their own special culture and will have their own approach to culture, but they will have the ability to regulate the number of tourists in order to give the tourists a good experience, but also mainly to preserve nature and preserve local culture and to develop local culture. And we also believe that tourism can also be a regenerative tourism, that also the increasing number of tourists, if we approach it with a sustainability approach, can also be part of regenerating some of our nature that has already been overexplored. That's the approach. Culture, and we also hope to explore our cultural bonds with Japan. And I could give an example that we also have, in cooperation with the Japanese embassy in Copenhagen, we also screen Japanese films and so on in the Faroe Islands. So we have a very rich, both modern but also traditionally based cultural approach in the Faroe Islands. We have a huge music export, a huge musical scene that spans from classical music to heavy rock and so on. And we have a very and have put very huge effort and fundings to have musical schools in the Faroe Islands where pupils can approach from their 5 to 6 years to have a musical education. And of course, the challenge is to also to modernize our culture, because we have these long traditions of Faroese epical ballads and chain dance and so on. These are also transitioned now into modern music, to both classical music, to heavy metal music, to rock music and so on. So that is one of the bases for for the cultural for the cultural development in the Faroe Islands at the moment. We, of course, also are trying very hardly to protect our cultural heritage, also to have more of our sites acknowledged as UNESCO cultural heritage sites. And of course, the biggest issue is to modernize and develop our language. We are only 55,000 people in the Faroe Islands, perhaps 15,000 Faroe Islands around the world that can speak Faroese. But we have to maintain our own literature, our own film industry, also in Faroese. So of course, this demands huge fundings and cooperation with our neighbors, and that is actually going quite well at the moment with visual arts, with theater, with films, and so on. So we hope that we also can have cultural arrangements here in Japan or in the Faroe Islands where we can exchange films, Faroese films, and we can see Japanese films, for instance. So that is our biggest challenge. And of course, as a small nation, we have to know the world, and we have to learn other languages through our own language. So one of the largest achievements in recent times is that we now have dictionaries from Faroese to almost every large language in the world. And we also have a Faroese Japanese dictionary. And that's quite an achievement. So we can go directly from Faroese to Japanese, also in cooperation with some of the very skilled Japanese people that live in the Faroe Islands. So we see that as crucial for our survival, that we will not only preserve our language, but we have to modernize it and to approach the world through our own language and learn other languages through our own approach. Just basically to address again whaling, and this is again the more global sustainability approach to the ocean. We have similar thoughts that Japan has also towards the IWC, the International Whaling Commission, and so on. But basically, in the Faroe Islands, we have had these small whales called pilot whales as a so important part of our economy and our social structure for many, many years, because whaling in the Faroe Islands is not an industrial whaling. It's only when these groups of whales approach the islands that they are driven into the sea, into the beaches and killed, and all the meat and blubber is divided evenly among all citizens for no charge, with no money involved. But our approach to whaling, and I know this is a big issue on the world scene, is that as long as we can document that the Faroes whaling is sustainable to the stocks, and it's done also in a human way, we think this is crucial for the principle of the right to explore and to use our national marine resources, even if it's fish or whale or anything. If it's sustainable and we can document it with scientific approaches, then of course this is important for us. But there are still campaigns against Faroese whaling, even though we claim this is the most sustainable thing you can do. This is an animal that is there anyway. We take only 1% to 2% of the stock every year, and there's no emissions, and the meat and the blubber is divided evenly. So we claim this is the most sustainable approach to the usage of natural living marine resources. So that's what is very important for us, to maintain this right, even though there is pressure from many parts of the world, because when you kill a whale, as you know here in some parts of Japan, it's of course bloody and it can be quite dramatic, but still I believe this is the most sustainable thing to do. And I could take myself as an example. I love to be in a whale killing, as we call it, and I take my grandchildren and children with me, and they have respect for the animals and respect for what nature gives us. So in Faroese, this pilot whale, the grind in Faroese, is called a gift from God, because it was so crucial for survival. Today, of course, we couldn't manage without it, but then we would have to import other proteins from abroad that would have a high emissions of carbon dioxide and so on. So we still think this is the most sustainable way of using marine resources. So that is the brief introduction to the Faroes I would make today. This is the Faroese handball national team, the men's handball national team that is here in Japan at the moment, playing against Japan, because Japan is preparing for the Olympics in men's handball. So we are also happy to have those cultural connections. Finally, I will just address again the dire situation of the world today. The Faroe Islands has approached the aggression from Russia and the horrible aggression from Russia in Ukraine with sanctions against Russia and so on. But we still have a limited fisheries agreement with Russia. Again, that is based upon the rule of law, trying to have control and international agreements on how you use fish in our area. And also because some of these fisheries have some importance for some parts of the Faroe Islands. So I think we have a quite similar approach. But otherwise, we have supported Ukraine in every way, and also we take Ukrainian refugees to the Faroe Islands and support them with humanitarian aid and so on. And the Faroe Islands are engaging quite heavily now also in taking their own part in the security situation in the North Atlantic, cooperating closely with the US, with the UK, and with NATO on keeping peace, stability, and prosperity in our part of the world. And again, the approach must be international law, international treaties, international rules, and also the renewal of bilateral and multilateral agreement on every issue, on the ocean, on the preservance of natural resources, and also on peace and security and trade. So that is the Faroes approach to the world today, and we hope that even though things can look grim at the moment, that the world will go towards that vision, and we see Japan as a close partner on values and is approaching the world with the same values in order to keep peace and prosperity for the nations of the world. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, His Excellency, Mr. Hoidal. And now, I should like to invite Mr. Sigmundo Isfeldo, the representation of the Faroe Islands in Beijing, to join us in a panel discussion. And the panel discussion is moderated by Dr. Sakaguchi, the president of the OPRI, Ocean Research Policy Institute. Now over to you.
First of all, I thank you very much for your very concise but comprehensive introduction of Faroe Island. I think all the audience learned quite intensely about Faroe Island, and also we are very much interested in Faroe Island more and more. I thank you very much. It is just like the 5 or 6 lectures in 30 minutes at school. So we learned, geography and diplomatic relationship and Arctic issues and culture, tourism, and one more thing we learned. And thank you so much. And also, Minister Isfeldt, thank you very much for joining us today all the way from Beijing. So let's start this panel discussion, giving some questions from me. The first question I want to give Minister Hoidal is, in addition to the match of handball in between Faroe Island and Japan, but what is the main objective to come to Japan this time? I heard from you it's your first time to come to visit Japan, but as I mentioned in my introduction, 2 years ago the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs visited Japan and made a memorandum together with the government of Japan. So we are getting closer and closer. So what is your main point to visit Japan this time?
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Sakaguchi. Yes, the main object is to try and to take the next steps in having stronger bilateral connections between Japan and the Faroe Islands. On these issues I mentioned here today, because this memorandum of cooperation that we signed in 22 has a wide range of approaches on education, on culture, on green transition, on technological exchange, cooperation on research, but also, of course, on trade and free trade relations. So the purpose of this visit is to try to take the next step based upon this memorandum. And we already have had some very good meetings with Japanese ministers and I must thank you for your great hospitality. And the other mission is, of course, you have mentioned that you don't know so much about the Faroe Islands. We think we know something about Japan, but I think we are so ignorant in our part of the world that we think that Japan is something we have seen in some American films, but I won't reach it this time, but I would like to come back to see the diverse culture of Japan, this ancient civilization and so on, also in order to enlighten our people about all the things that Japan stands for, to create a connection the other way, back to the North Atlantic, about Japan's approach to the world and so on. That's the second objective of the purpose. And then, of course, that there is a Japanese-Faroes handball match at the same time. That was quite a coincidence, but we are quite happy that we can also see that, which is historical, that Japan and the Faroe Islands are playing a handball match for the first time here in Tokyo.
Thank you very much. Now we are getting more and more understand the importance of the relationship between Faroe Island and Japan. And I have another question to the Minister Isfeld, the representation of the Faroe in Beijing. And so I would like to ask you, what is the function of your existence as a representation of the Faroes in Beijing? Maybe you have some view of not only China, but also covering whole Asian countries, because you attended Arctic Circle Japan Forum 2023 last year, and gave some perspectives of Faroe Island last year. So could you please explain it again, and we can more and more understand about your function? Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Sakaguchi. Yes, as our foreign minister very well explained, we have a small population, and even though our per capita production and economy is quite substantial, the total volume is, of course, limited compared to larger nations, which means we have to be very strategic about our representation in other countries. So we have had more and more trade, especially to Asian countries, and as the Chinese economy grew so fast for the last several years, it became a very important market for the Faroe Islands. So that was why we established our first ever representation in Asia, in Beijing. But the idea was all the time to cover the whole region, which we have done as well as we can with a limited manpower, of course. So we did it in the way that I was side accredited to a few other countries, first and foremost Japan, but also South Korea and Singapore. And we see this region, the whole East Asia region, as more and more important in the world. Of course, very important for the Faroe Islands and for the whole world, actually, because as you know, the economic dynamics of the world is changing from the west to the east. Of course, we still luckily have some economic dynamics going on in the West, but we can see the East is becoming more and more important in the world economy. And for the Faroe Islands, the export markets here are very important and growing. Japan is one of the nations of the world that consumes most seafood. You might argue that we should have also our own representation in Tokyo, which there would be very good reasons for. But it is just being a very tiny population with limited resources. We had to choose one place. It became Beijing, but we cover also Japan from here. And I would say that especially now as the world is changing or has changed and is still changing, the relationship between the Faroe Islands and Japan, I would say, have especially good conditions for growing much more.
Thank you very much. It is indeed important, your comment and input for all Asian countries. And today we have a special guest in the audience, Mr. Kimura. He's a president of Sushi Zanmai company. And last week, I personally had a very good discussion with him. What he mentioned is due to overprotection of whale and dolphins, listening to many opinions from as a pressure, and then as a result, instead of the sustainability of mammals, but sustainability of valuable fish, especially tuna and skipjack, bonito, and some other fish, gradually destroyed, not just by global warming, but some overprotection. That is negative sustainability. And so he mentioned, as Minister Hoidal mentioned in his lecture today, we have a long history with both Faroe Island and Japan for the whaling, and carefully follow the rules and the sustainability. And so we should not be too much emotional about whaling. And that is the conversation between Mr. Kimura and myself had last week. So you touched upon about this issue. So could you please give the comment on this issue, and then I can ask Mr. Kimura for his response.
Yes, thank you very much, and that's a very good question, Mr. Kimura. Well, our approach to in the Faroe Islands is quite, again, based upon the question of the right to utilize living natural resources sustainably. And as what we see also in the international community is an overprotection where, in my opinion, some of the old industrial powers of the world that used also to overutilize all natural resources, now they are buying some salvation by saying, well, we will protect the whales and make sanctuaries or close for any sustainable utilization of special species in the sea. And I don't believe that is sustainable. I think the only sustainable way is to say, well, of course we have the right to harvest, and we need to harvest from the sea in order to feed our growing world population. The seas are 70% of our blue planet. So yes, I think there's not an approach towards whaling and so on that is focusing on sustainability, but it's focusing on some kind of, yes, a humanization of some species, an emotional approach, also very often based upon Hollywood films and so on, that I think is quite the opposite of sustainability. Sustainability is not only to protect some areas while you still overexploit others. You have to find the balance, and we believe we have found it in the Faroese whaling. Of course, there have been big problems in the world of industrial whaling, we know that, but as long as it is sustainable, based upon stock assessments, and you only take a small part, and you use it often in a better way also compared to other emission-high production of food, I think that is the approach to sustainability, and large ocean nations like ours should work together on that approach, also in international law and regulations, and not an approach where you actually say that some species are just off the table because of emotions and not because of sustainability.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Kimura. Do you have any comments to share? Well, thank you very much indeed. I greatly appreciate the great talk, keynote presentation. Sustainable fishing is indeed necessary. I agree with that. Over the last 20 years, the protection and of the stock and bluefin tuna and the fish stock of that species has been growing over the last 20 times over the last 20 years. So the whale stock 20 years ago and today's stock today, let's say if you are on board a week, the bluefin tail, well, we used to take the bluefin, the whale, a week, but now we are able to take several the whales a week, but they are not controlled properly, and so they take they eat other fish species like the mackerel, and these are the pelagic species they are declining. So let's say that out of the 10 tons of fish stock, only 10% is taken by humans and eaten, and the remaining 90% are taken by whales. So how to strike a better balance? This is the issue. And also, the Faroe.
I know that the bluefin tuna that could be harvested in Ireland and other parts, but compared to them, I would say the Faroe Island bluefin tuna is so great, so delicious, and yet there is a limited allocation by ICAT, and hope that there will be something that could be due so that we could get more allocation so that we can enjoy the most delicious bluefin tuna from Faroe Islands. Thank you very much, and that's exactly the voice from the ground.
Isabel, did you catch up with the comment what Mr. Kimura made? And so you have any reply comment to increase the number of tonnage coming from fellow to Japan and fellow to Asian countries?
Yes, first let me say that I fully agree that striking the balance between the fisheries of different species is very important because, as our foreign minister also pointed out, that all that we do in our utilization of the resources in the ocean has to be built on scientific data. So we know what's in the ocean, how much of each, know the biological circumstances so that we know what we can take out. And so this is an ecosystem that is complicated, and we are following this very closely. And we have also very skillful scientists working in the Faroe Islands and in cooperation with other nations' scientists. So this is a very, very important issue. So that was the first part, as I understood your comment. The second part, our mission here in Japan and Asia and my job actually, is to try to help our businesses in connection with the local markets to increase the volumes of the different types of fish species that are consumed and the consumers are interested in Japan and other countries in this region. So I can just say that we are doing our best to increase the volumes, and it's all done or with the concern for the biological. The ecological system in the oceans. I think that is basically.
Thank you very much. And at last, we have another guest from Hitotsubashi University, Professor Akahori. Could you please raise your hand? Yes. He's expert of the whaling culture and history. And he is going to visit Faroe Island next week for his research work. So, Professor Akahori, could you please, since we don't have enough time, but a brief question or comment, either of Minister Hoidal or Minister Isfeld.
Thank you very much for your splendid talk today. My name is Akamine, and I'm interested in whaling issues. Not wearing itself. Through wearing issues, I like to see the modern societies, and as sociologically as well as anthropologically. I really appreciate your long tradition of pilot whaling, non-profit, and communal-based whaling. It's very fantastic. But I'm wondering, does whaling place negative impact to tourism industry? Of course, I can see by myself, but I like to listen to your comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we look forward to see you in the Faroe Islands. You are so welcome. Yes, it has had some impact, especially on such a thing as cruise ships that approach the Faroe Islands and the Arctic, as you know, in large numbers. They have cancelled some trips to the Faroe Islands because of the pilot whale catching. When there is a pilot killing, it comes into very often the UK. Very often UK newspaper and so on, and there's some negative impact. But still, my experience is that when you have people coming to the Faroe Islands and they experience them by themselves, and it can be quite dramatic, they can also change their minds. So yes, there's some impact, and there are some campaigns going on very often and continuously, but still we see this as so important for the principle of sustainable use of living resources, and also to ecosystem approach of management of the oceans. And the most important thing, both for fish stocks and for whale, is that if we do not have international law and international regulations, and that's why we are quite dissatisfied with the IWC. It doesn't work at the moment. Then, of course, there's a much bigger chance for unsustainable usage. So we must focus on having the international law, regional management, bilateral agreements, and not the least the scientific approach and the scientific research and all these matters in order to achieve what we have been speaking about here.
Thank you very much. I think familiar about Faroe Island. Think about 1 hour ago. We don't know. We didn't know. But now we are quite familiar. And since the tourism part I just questioned and introduced, why don't we go to visit Faroe Island to enjoy the beauty and nature, and also humanity in the Faroe Islands. So I thank you very much for today's lecture, together with the comment from Minister Isfeld, and we really enjoyed today, and I hope the handball match between Faroe Island and Japan become very exciting, and we can, pick up and learn piece by piece and also strengthen the relationship through this event. I thank very much again.
Thank you very much. This concludes the speech session by His Excellency Mr. Hoidal, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Faroe Islands. Thank you very much, Mr. Hoidal, and Mr. Isfeld, Head of Representation of the Faroe Islands in Beijing. Thank you very much indeed for today's participation. Please return the interpretation receiver at the entrance of this hall, as well as the name tag at the entrance as well. And if time allows, please stay with us for the conversation session. A coffee and tea will be served. Thank you.